Hey, this is the Level Up Engineering Podcast, where we talk with some of the most successful tech leaders who reveal actionable management insights that help you take your developer team to the next level. This episode was brought to you by Coding Sans, a software development agency building web applications with Angular and Node.js. Check them out at codingsans.com.
Hey everyone, welcome to Level Up Engineering. Our podcast is aimed at cultivating knowledge every engineering manager will benefit from. I'm your host, Carolina Toth. Today, our guest is someone who operates at the intersection of technology and business with a proven track record. It's my pleasure to welcome Steve McCord, Senior Vice President of Technology at WhyHotel. Hi, Steve.
Hey there, thanks for having me.
Please tell us a bit about yourself and what you do.
I've been kind of in the product technology world for probably 15, 20 years now. Kind of did R&D early on in my career, engineering-wise, jumped into product, jumped back into technology, kind of led big and small teams throughout that whole thing, as big as 200, as small as 2. Kind of been in the startup world for this whole time as well, but really kind of focused in on technology and data.
Awesome. Sounds like you've had a lot of different kinds of experiences. Today, our topic is really at the foundation of any new role. It doesn't have to be an engineering role, but it's especially timely as you have just switched over to a new position. Today, our topic is the first 100 days of becoming an engineering manager. So let's jump right in and let me ask you, what is the biggest challenge when you transition to a new place?
Yeah, I think I've had that challenge in a few things, and I think it kind of depends on the situation for sure. I've been in organizations that have a track record of a lot of leadership overturn, and they already have an established team and things like that, and that's a little different versus what I'm currently dealing with, which is kind of more of a greenfield team. There's been no technology in this organization. My task is to bring technology into the organization and bring that technological background to the organization. You have kind of two main problems. The first is everywhere. You have to catch up. There's a bunch of decisions being made. There's people that are ahead of you, essentially. They understand the business better than you. They may even understand the technology stack better than you. And really, you're trying to get to that point where you know just as much or maybe better, right? That's the ideal state for me, right? Is that, inside any technology organization, they're always looking for you to provide some answers. And when you have that first 100 days, you don't really know anything, right? You're kind of like, oh, why did that decision get made? And what is this piece of technology? And it's beyond technology, to your point of it's not just a technological problem. It's why did we make this business decision 6 months ago and things like that. The other thing that's relevant if you have an established team is really getting to know the staff on hand. I'd say my last job, there was an established engineering culture and team of 40 people that I had to quickly understand what they did, what they were good at, were they good for the organization, these types of things. So you're constantly balancing like the business and technological understanding of what's going on, as well as, understanding who's in the building, underutilizing your emotional intelligence to understand the people in the building. Are they good engineers? You're evaluating talent. But you're also evaluating like personalities, and do they clash with you? Is the organization desire that type of personality? Those types of things. So you're kind of in evaluation mode and trying to get through that hump as much as possible.
Mm-hmm. So you are basically getting to know everything around you and catching up as fast as possible. Do you have any specific steps for us? What should our first 100 days look like? What are the most crucial things that we must get accomplished within the first 100 days?
Yeah, I think as a leader, especially if you're in the executive rung, they're really looking for you to make your stamp and create a plan of what's going on. And that kind of depends on the organization again, right? Inside of my current organization, it is fast and furious. I have to make a lot of decisions, regardless of 100 days. I have to make them first week I was in the building, right? There was no technology, and they really need help kind of defining that vision, where we're going, and we got to make some choices. Mm-hmm. I'd say in my previous worlds, it wasn't such a maybe a rush to make some decisions. And I actually tend to hold off on making really rushed decisions without full context because, that can be a very dangerous thing. So some of my tricks that I tend to, do is, the typical things. Like from a technology standpoint, I want to access all the source code. I want to understand the documentation of what's going on so I can really understand not only the technology stack that we have, but also the talent that's writing that tech stack, right? Understanding, how are they commenting? How are they committing their code? What does the architecture look like and things like that? Now, that's very technological for sure. The other things that I tend to look for are non-technology oriented. What's our budget? What is the product offering? What's the roadmap of the product? What are some of the business contracts that we have in place today? Really understanding the staffing and the roster, I tend to just do that with one-on-ones, right? I'm not generally a one-on-one reoccurring, but I think that first initial 100 days, you really have to get to know people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not just like, you really need to evaluate if they're good talent, but you also have to understand what makes them tick. What's their motivations? Like, sometimes culture can be a problem in organizations. And sometimes I've been brought in to fix the technological culture of an organization. You have to really dive deep and go, what's broken, right? In that exact instance. And then you've got to figure out, are the people broken? Is the system broken? Is it the company that's broken? And we're just all falling in line to that kind of thing. The other thing is what your peer set looks like. Right. And I guess that goes across anything. Even if you at the executive rung, you need to understand what type of leadership you have. Right. Do you have a very hands-on, let's dig in type of executive team, or do you have a much more hands-off, let's push everything down? Very different styles. You've got to make sure you understand that. I'd say you'd hope that you find out a lot of this stuff during the interview process, but sometimes you don't get that luxury for sure. You're really trying to figure out, back to the plan, what are all the things that you need to do to make your 30, 60, 90 days really impactful for the organization? And for me, it's not about perception so much. It's about making sure that you're making a great impact and you're actually putting together a plan that really moves the organization forward, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so those are the kind of things that I tend to think through, to get moving.
Mm-hmm. Just so we can all be on the same page, WhyHotel is really a new kind of service in the accommodation industry. Would you care to enlighten us about how it joins up with technology, what WhyHotel does, and how it works?
Yeah, it's an interesting business model. I think Jason and Bao, the founders of WhyHotel, really went about this in the right way. I've been in a few startups, and it's very easy to think that you need technology right out of the gate. It's kind of weird saying this as a technologist, but oftentimes technology is very expensive. You got expensive to manage. You gotta build roadmaps. There's just things that you have to deal with, and talent alone is expensive, right? And so, what they really went about is said, I'm going to prove this business model. And really, what the business model is hey, there's condos that are being built throughout the nation. It takes years for them to get rentals or people to buy them or anything like that. And essentially we come in and say, hey, we can operate a hotel for you in between 9 and 18 months. And we can start giving you revenue while you're trying to get these apartments leased out. We bring a little bit of more luxury hotel experience to the whole game. So it's very much of an operating company and hospitality company. So it's all about guest experience and making sure our experience is better than most. And instead of going to, a hotel and just getting a bed in a one room, you can go to ours and get a 1-bedroom apartment, right? And so, there's some luxury to that. Now, where the technology piece can come in is where I think the hospitality industry has lacked probably big time to date is how can technology build efficiencies to pricing models, for example? Like, how do we price our hotels? Like, how can we use machine learning and data science to do that? That's something new that I have to bring into WhyHotel. How do we gain efficiencies of operating the company? It's just bare bones as that, right? We've been doing this with bodies, and that's great because all we were trying to do is prove the business model worked. Now we've got some sense that, hey, this business model works. Now we got to scale this thing. Now we need to pop up, even more hotels and really gain traction and scale out the organization. It's harder to do that with bodies, right? And then ultimately, long term, WhyHotel sees it as itself as a technology platform, right? Strategically, they need to be, and we need to be, a technology platform developers, real estate developers can come to and use our platform to kind of perform this type of hospitality living. Like, so there's a big chunk of work for me to do and meaty work to be done. It's very greenfield because we don't really have technology. We've just been operating with bodies today.
Sounds like it's a two-way challenge. It's evangelizing kind of the company into technology, and it's also you coming to the company as in a new position as the SVP. So is there anything specific that you'd recommend that someone who is in a similar position does? What is it that you have to pay closest attention to?
It depends on each company, right?
Right.
But I will say that I think there's two main things that I tend to do, and they're not very even technological, right? I mean, I think there's just the table stakes of, yes, you have to make sure you figure out your architecture and things like that. But I think people often rush into figuring that out, meaning, hey, if we don't necessarily know what the business problem is, we shouldn't really probably be talking about technical architecture and diving super deep and getting real heavy there, right? And so for me, just in WhyHotel and in general, like I say, everywhere, is like I like to build two main things: trust and culture around this, right? And in WhyHotel, this is interesting because it isn't a technological company. Most folks here are from real estate and hospitality. So there could be a natural inclination. What's this technical guy doing? Right? It's not in my world. Right. And so I tend to like to kind of breed trust. Right. Is like, how do I make decisions so it's not tearing people apart? Like, not going in and saying, why did you make this decision? Right. Like, hey, I'm sure there were reasons why we made decisions. Let's talk about them. Right. And, really kind of proving yourself out that you're a team player. Right. Even at the executive level. And I'm one that really believes that even executives have to walk the walk and talk the talk. Right. You can't just say things. You have to really show people what yours, and that's a cultural component, right? We have to show them that you're open and transparent about communication. You're empathetic and you have an emotional intelligence. Just kind of really demonstrate my core values of being accountable and transparent to the team and show them how to be, right? I think that's really a big thing. I like to listen and like kind of what are all the challenges of the organization, and so I think these two things are very softy feely for sure. And it sounds weird coming from a technologist, but I think if you can set these type of tones and you can build trust across the organization that, hey, Steve's going to handle it, then there's a lot of things that just become easier long term, right? If I want to make a big decision, people go, oh, well, I trust Steve. He's very honest about what he does. He works really hard. Things are just much easier after you kind of set those kind of things out. Now, in addition to WhyHotel, I'm making meaty technical conversation. We have to vendor selections and just what our code stack's going to look like. And even as basic as what our IT infrastructure needs to look like, right? You definitely still need to make some core decisions, but you have to make sure you're evangelizing that across the organization so they don't feel like Steve is just jamming stuff down my throat, right? It's got to feel like we're all in it together. And so I tend to like to get that sense of culture and trust across the organization as I start progressing. I mean, even today, this is my third week at WhyHotel. I'm really focusing in on showing people, hey man, I want to get my hands dirty. I want to figure out what are the problems across this organization so I can help. It's not about me pointing and go, oh God, you guys made so many bad choices, right? Like that's not helpful. And nor did they really make any poor choices for the time being, right? And a year ago, that might have been a great choice, right? And so who am I to come in and act like I'm holier than thou, right? Right? I think having that kind of empathetic personality and a humble kind of approach, I think is very important when you come into an organization. I think when you come off like a know-it-all or you're just making decisions, buy or be damned, I think even if it's the right choices, I think people are off put and then it can actually hurt you long term down the road.
Right. It almost sounds like you bring this kind of a retrospective mindset into your everyday. So you mentioned you just joined and it's your third week at WhyHotel, but you touched on the fact that the decisions that you encounter might have been the best decisions that they could have made at the time with the knowledge that they had and with their best intentions. So, is there anything that you would do differently? Now you're 3 weeks in. This might be a bit early of a question, but would you point to anything?
Not yet at my current stage. I think it's a bit early right now. I will say that in my past lives, I think you've nailed it, is I tend to like to look at my past and understand where I've kind of misstepped. And I think now, I don't know, maybe hit me up in 6 months and I'm sure I will have many failures. I do not deny that. But I'd say in my previous life, I think there's a few things that I've done that I tend to learn from now. Is I think one is jumping into rash decisions. I think it's easy to do, to be honest. I think people look at any kind of hire and go, oh my God, they're going to solve the problem. Let's solve it right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in my youth, I have oftentimes just said, damn it, let's just go and let's just figure it out. Right. And I think you still need to do that, because I think, figuring it out while doing it is really important, because planning it and sometimes it's hard and sometimes you got to learn by doing. But being arrogant to think you can solve problems in weeks, I think, is challenging.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that doesn't actually, and it may be the wrong problem to solve. I think that's kind of more where my thinking goes, is that when you listen to the loudest person or the first person talking to you in an organization, it's their perspective. And I think it's very important to really understand what's going wrong. And if it's going right, awesome. But oftentimes you're brought in to solve some problems.
Right.
And, sometimes people get it wrong on what the real problem is. And I've gone down paths where I'm building, and then, we take a step back and go, well, that's not the problem at all. And we just wasted 6 months, right? And so I think this goes into my next point, is like really establishing goals and accountability structure from the top is super important. And I try to do that when I come in and set a tone at the executive level that needs to happen. Because I think if we have moving targets, if we're not really clear on what we're trying to solve at an organizational level and a strategic value for the company, then we're all just running around in different directions. And I've definitely felt that in many organizations that I've been a part of, because I don't think there was alignment at the top, or, people said one thing and then everybody walked out and did another thing, right? So I tend to try to do that. And there's times where I've just completely whiffed on that, to be quite frank, and I haven't been successful. And it actually affects the culture and the people working in the building a lot more, because they're working hard and they're moving in the wrong direction and they don't even know it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a leadership failure on my part. I think I've done that in the past, and I try to take that forward and say, hey, let's not do that. And it's easy to do that sometimes at the executive level when you don't understand all the core problems, or maybe there's not alignment at the leadership level on the right approaches or what the right thing is for the company.
Mm-hmm. So I sense that you have kind of pointed out that when joining in as a new tech leader, you shouldn't be pushed into making rash decisions, and you shouldn't try to fulfill the expectations coming in, because it may be that the expectations are not properly set up. What else should you not do during these first 100 days? What do you see as something that people tend to get wrong?
That's a good question. The first thing I think about is watch out for past decisions. There are sacred cows in almost every organization I've ever been a part of. So really just be careful there. I mean, I think if you come in and you go, hey, Project X is stupid, you come off very, that's just not a very empathetic way to, one, approach a problem. And two, people are going to just be put off by you. And even if that sacred cow is wrong or needs to be fixed, there's ways to approach that. And I think that's just using some common sense and emotional intelligence. And I know that's maybe a softy way to do it, but I think emotional intelligence is often lacking in technology organizations for sure. That's one thing I never do. Even if you think the decision was so wrong that nobody could make that, you don't have all the context of what's happened in the past. You don't know, it would be so arrogant of me to think that I just have all the answers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I tend to, like I said, I try to bring humility to the job and respect the people that are there, even if they made poor choices or whatever, right? And I think I've seen this, I've seen tech leaders come in, even working for me. I've come in and just beat the shit up on a tech stack or something like, oh, I don't like this code, or, this decision was so stupid. They might be right. Taking a step back, I could even say they were probably 100% right. But you don't say it that way. There's ways to approach it. And even if the engineering talent is bad in an organization or lacks creativity, people still put pride into their work. Just treating people with a modicum of respect, even if you're going to remove them from an organization, I think people appreciate that. And I think people take that to heart and respect what you're doing more. And I think it goes back to, I think people respect you and know that you're empathetic to the problems. They either, one, are going to get motivated by that, or two, even if they're not motivated by that and you have to remove them, there's still mutual respect and we can all part in good ways, and it doesn't have to be a negative thing. That's maybe where I focus mostly.
Right. So you mentioned coming from the company's perspective. I'm sure you have welcomed many new leaders into the companies that you've worked for, and you've maybe helped other engineering managers take on this path. How do you think a company can make this transition as seamless as possible?
It depends. That's like my answer for everything. But I think about it in different levels, right? I'm an SVP right now of technology, right? I need some guardrails, right? I don't have any qualms of talking to my leader who I report into and say, hey, where the guardrails need to be. And what I mean by guardrails is, hey, where should I focus a little bit? Mm-hmm. And now I'm senior enough to understand, like, give me the guardrails and I'll figure out the rest. That doesn't necessarily work for everybody. Some people need very clear things. And I think that if you just do guardrails everywhere and you assume everyone is aligned, that can be dangerous. So one of the things that I really preach inside an organization is we have to be crystal clear on what our strategic goals are for a year, a quarter, a month. Oftentimes, I think leaders forget that, and it almost just becomes this, hey, we're just working towards something, and we don't even know. I've talked to many people who are working the front lines, and they're like, why are we doing this? They don't even understand the impact or what they're doing. And that's a failure on leadership. If I think about middle management, to me, it's really setting clear priorities of like, these are the things that I need accomplished in a quarter, right? When I think about senior engineers, and I mean, let's go even further down the spectrum, junior engineers, you can't give too much latitude. I do believe in freedom, right? I think one of the things that I preach around here is I want to bring in developers that know how to work. I'm not here to babysit. I'm here to teach. I'm here to mentor, and I'm here to guide, right? But I don't want to sit here and be the taskmaster and tell you exactly what to do. But there is a barometer there, right? Like for me, probably at one of the most senior technology levels, give me some guardrails. Let me figure out the priorities. I just want to make sure that I'm focused on the right areas of the business to add strategic value. That's my first 3 weeks here. I'm asking those questions. Like, am I focusing in on the right problem? Mm-hmm. I just hired somebody on Monday, first day. I'm clearly saying, hey, this area is a problem. You dive deep, and she's really, diving deep on the problem. I'm not telling her exactly how to dive deep, but I'm giving her, hey, this area of focus is super important. But that comes from my leader telling me, hey, these areas are important. So I'm going to put somebody on my team very focused in on that problem because I can't go super deep on it myself. To me, I think it's a goal setting process. Mm-hmm. It's setting priorities. It's actually leadership communicating to the rest of the company what's important too. And I think that's often overlooked. If we just tell everybody in pocket vacuums of what's important, then everybody can interpret things differently, right? And so I think it's very clear. We've got to be very clear at the leadership level to say, these are the things that are important for us. Anything else not on this list, let's not talk about it, right? Let's not distract anybody else in this organization around it. Because the main goal that we want to create is uninterrupted focus on people solving problems, especially in technology, right? It's an art. It needs an immense amount of focus, right? If you're distracted all the time and getting pulled here and there, things don't get delivered. And then expectations aren't set. And then how do we hold each other accountable?
Right.
All that good stuff, right? So for me as a leader on my team, I'm thinking through all those things for my team coming in, right? I have a team of 3 people coming in, and I want to set clear expectation of what needs to be delivered, what's priority, and what I expect out of them. And I expect them to have enough wherewithal to make great decisions, but I'm going to hold them accountable to deliver. And they know that from me, right? And if they don't deliver, we should talk about why we're not delivering.
Mm-hmm.
Because anything in technology is all about delivering value to the customer. If we're not doing that, what the hell are we doing around here, right? And so for me as a leader, that I try to set clear expectations about that. I often try to, when I'm at the executive rung, I try to make sure all of our executive rung is doing that exact same thing across the organization, because if the other organizational units aren't doing that, it can also create churn inside of a technology organization or throughout an organization. So I think it's simple in a lot of ways, but it's often messed up.
Right.
And so
Right.
I think no matter how you do it, create focus that's aligned to your enterprise value is super critical.
We have touched on quite a few things. We have talked about the strategic goals. We have talked about clear communications. We have talked about getting to know your team. And we have also talked about getting to know your peers and the leadership inside an organization. We touched on some of the things that might go wrong in the beginning and people should avoid doing. And we also touched on some of the company's responsibilities and expectations when a new technology leader comes into play. Is there anything that we haven't touched on and you think is important to mention?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one other thing I'd say is it kind of goes hand in hand with trust and culture, but building relationships. I mean, that's what we're really doing inside of organizations as well. I know we're getting things done, but I really think establishing relationships across the organization is super important. Your cross-discipline interest with, even human resources or the business line, sales, things like that. I mean, I think showing humility of engineering is super important. Like, don't be the token engineering asshole, right? I think is important, and I think it ingratiates you across the organization. I think showing honest interest in the business or your peers' discipline is really important. Of, hey, you're selling. What does that look like? How does that affect me? Genuine interest. If you're not, then you got to be real. Don't fake it. But for me, I'm genuinely interested on how different business units run and things like that, because you got to put all the pieces together, right? You've got to show the product and the engineering strategy all coalescing together. Showing your work is really important to me everywhere, right? Showing your value. What did you do? And show it to me. That's super important. And then just really installing confidence throughout the organization that you're going to do a great job. Mm-hmm. I think that's kind of the heart and soul of this, is that you got to build confidence as quickly as possible that you're the guy. Right. They're making a bet on you. It's a hiring process, right? Like any great hirer, I fancy myself a pretty good hirer, but I've missed. And you know what I mean? You're going to miss 20% of the time at best. They're making a bet on you, and you've got to show them that you're the one to bet on. That's doing the things I just talked about, but like really it comes down to confidence. And if they've got confidence in you, then they've got trust in you, and they go, well, Steve's going to crush it. I know him. He's killing it, right, on all this other stuff. So I think those are the final pieces I would say about on relationship building.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. Where could our listeners follow you or find your work online?
Yeah, I'm not, I don't really have much social presence, but if you want to learn about me, I'm on LinkedIn, a public profile there. You can kind of see my history there. I have a couple public GitHub repos there under Steven McCord. But yeah, you can kind of follow my work. That's probably the best way to follow my work there.
Awesome. Be sure to find Steve on LinkedIn. Thank you, Steve, for this insightful talk.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me.
Thank you for staying with us today on Level Up Engineering. We want to offer you the best experience possible. So if you have a question you've always been eager to ask of your peers in the industry, here's your chance. Send it to levelup@codingsense.com. Our guest today was Steven McCord from WhyHotel. My name is Carolina Toth, and I hope to see you next time.
Thanks for staying with Level Up Engineering. If you enjoyed this podcast, so will your friends. Share this episode on your favorite social networking platform. To stay up to date with our content, follow Level Up Engineering on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or Google Podcast. Brought to you by Coding Sans, a software development agency building web applications with Angular and Node.js. Check them out at codingsans.com.